there is a very, very big game happening in the Big 12 Conference in Stillwater, Oklahoma. You got Texas going to play Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State kind of licking their wounds after a loss where they really had that game at hand, a bad loss in a lot of ways against TCU. And Texas is favored by 6 points in this game. So we know the conversation that's always around Texas at this time of the year. Right now, there are a lot of people having the yes, but when talking about Texas. Yeah, you played Alabama close, but can you beat a solid opponent on the road? Yeah, you beat Iowa State, but what happens when you get squeezed? So we're going to talk about that. But for Texas, they feel like they are on a revenge tour, and they got a good win last week against Iowa State. Good win is probably strong verbiage to use. They were happy to win that game. In some ways, depending on who you ask, fortunate to win that game. But they feel like they left something in the tank. Like they were, like I said, happy to win that game, but they feel like there was a little more that they were capable of doing in that game. Felt like they left some money on the table. And for them, the opportunity is very much so around the narrative of, okay, well, what happens when you go on the road? Because the Red River rivalry was a great win. That wasn't a road game. For the first time in a year, Texas has a chance to, well, not chance. If Texas wins the game, it'd be the first time in virtually a year for them to get a win like that on the road. So a lot of excitement in Austin for this game going on, obviously, in Stillwater. Now, for Oklahoma State, they're trying to hit the reset button because they came into that game last week in Fort Worth against TCU, undefeated, top dog in the Big 12, and they were marching towards Arlington, quite frankly. They still feel that way, but this is their chance to sort of steady themselves, collect themselves, and a win against Texas with how well Texas is playing and the conversation around Texas, that would do a lot for their perception nationally. I think it would also steady a lot of the belief in-house. Now, kind of an interesting setup, if you will, because I think both these programs have their sights set on the Big 12 championship, and a loss here for either team just shrinks that margin for error. Both have a loss in Big 12 conference play. 2 losses is kind of that magic number to where it's like you're on the fringe, right? Like you have a chance to still be in that game, but you can't have more than 2 losses in conference play and feel good about your chances making it. So, rubber meets road right now. High stakes. What goes into this game? One of the things that I'm most curious to see is Quinn Ewers. We talked about it being a road game, but even more than that, what's under the hood with this guy? I know he has a rocket for an arm. I know he's a cool customer. I know there's not a throw on the football field that he can't make, has played really well in the early going. But what happens when he gets squeezed a little bit? We talked about it already. Going to be a tough road environment. This will be the first time in his college career where he's starting a game and there is 60, 70,000 people yelling at you and yelling bad things about your mom and dad. How does he respond to that? Because remember, this is still a kid who's pretty young in terms of his development and maturation at the college level. Has been given a lot of praise, a lot of accolades that to this point I would say are all fair. Like he has validated a lot of the hype around him. But what happens now when he goes into that kind of raucous environment? On top of that, what happens when he has to play an exotic defense? Because he played a good defense against Alabama. I think we saw there's some issues with Alabama in the secondary, so we don't want to speculate too much. But with this defense at Oklahoma State, it's not Jim Knowles' defense anymore in terms of him calling the system, but Derek Mason has kind of deconstructed it and built it back up to where they're still pretty complex. Like this is still going to be a lot of unique looks for Quinn Ewers. So I'm curious, how does he process that? Is his processing slower with it being on the road? Does he lose composure? Because if he loses his composure and makes mistakes, that's going to potentially snowball momentum. The crowd will be as into it as Quinn Ewers, in my opinion, allows them to be. Something to keep an eye on. Because if he starts to have some errors and gives more momentum to that Oklahoma State offense, and starts to press, this could be a little bit of a slippery slope for young Ewers. So he's got a lot of juice. What happens when he gets squeezed? Excited to see that. Other thing I'm looking at for this game, one of the hinge points. Which Spencer Sanders do we get? And this isn't a new talking point for us here, and we don't have anything against Spencer Sanders. I'm just saying I need some consistency, my guy. Last week in the first half, he was mobile, he was fairly efficient through the air, and then the second half happened and it just felt like the wheels came off. Now, I also want to mention this. We don't know exactly how healthy he is, so maybe he's playing hurt, maybe that's part of it, but just throughout the duration of his career, that's kind of always been the question. Which kind of Spencer Sanders is showing up? Are we going to see the Spencer Sanders that came to play in Waco against Baylor this year, where he was really efficient with the football and didn't turn the ball over quite as much? I mean, 70% completion percentage is what he did in Waco, really good with his legs. Or do we see the Spencer Sanders where he shows up and has less than half of his passes completed? Like 44% is what he was at against TCU, 16 for 36. Throwing a lot of questionable passes, only ended up with one interception, but his decision-making routinely gave you some pause if you are a Cowboy fan. Spencer Sanders has a lot of ability, a lot of potential, but at the same time, for all of the positive things he's capable of doing, to the same token, he leaves himself a lot of potential to do just as many bad things, if that makes sense. So it's high risk, it's high reward. Which kind of Spencer Sanders do you get? Because if he's able to put the pressure on Texas by scoring points with his Oklahoma State offense, well, then you start to, like I said, you start to see this Texas program get squeezed. You start to see Quinn Ewers maybe press a little bit more than he would. Because they're down maybe 7-0, 10-0, whatever it is early. You see Ewers start to try and do more than he should. He tries to, try to force the ball downfield a little bit more. Is that the case? Because if you get good Spencer Sanders, that's more of a possibility. If not, then you kind of allow Quinn Ewers to gather himself. Game stays relatively low scoring early maybe, and he can kind of catch his breath, and then Texas can pour it on. That's not the situation you want to have if you're an Oklahoma State fan. So I'm curious to see which Spencer Sanders shows up. It'll be a very big deal in this game. Here's the thing that I'm most curious about. Because we watched Oklahoma State last week against TCU, and to be honest with you, the score could have gotten a little bit uglier than it did. TCU, in my opinion, left a lot of money on the table. Now, what do I mean by that? Spencer Sanders routinely threw the ball up, single coverage, gave his guy a chance, but threw it inside. Like TCU probably had their mitts on, at least to my recollection, 2 passes where they could have intercepted that and changed the course of the game early. At the exact same time, the Oklahoma State defense, while they're really complex, they're still developing in their first year under Derek Mason. That back end, their 5 DBs they play, only one of them is back from a year ago. You got 4 new cats playing in that spot. And when I watched that TCU offense, there were some plays to be had that they weren't able to connect on. For Texas, how much money do you leave on the table? Because Spencer Sanders, like I talked about, he's going to throw it up. The secondary for Texas, they feel pretty good about. Can they continue to play at the level they have this year? And even more so, can they ramp it up and get those 50-50 balls to be interceptions? If they can, you know the drill. Spots more points for your offense, at least more opportunities for your offense, and things can get going in a hurry. When you come to the offense, they're going to dial it up. They're going to try to be aggressive. Oklahoma State defense will, that is. They're going to try and make Ewers uncomfortable. They're going to gamble a little bit. And if you can punch them on the chin a few times early, if you can connect deep early, get Worthy involved, allow Bijan to eat a little bit, you know what I'm saying? It's going to put pressure back on Oklahoma State. But the whole key is when that money's on the table, you got to grab it. There will be opportunities. There will be plenty of plays to be had. But with Quinn Ewers, first real road start, can he connect on those? That's going to be crucial. Because Oklahoma State last week allowed 224 yards on the ground at TCU and still almost won the game. Over the course of the year, they're giving up 478 yards of total offense. So they're susceptible on defense. This is not the same defense you saw a year ago. Schematically, they're similar. Personnel-wise and execution-wise, they're not. They're very gettable for Texas and Quinn Ewers. Our prediction for this game, I just think Oklahoma State has the attention of Texas, and we talk about that a lot of where's the culture at, is there a potential letdown spot? We kind of saw that last week against Iowa State, winning ugly is part of it, but for Texas, I don't see that happening against Oklahoma State. I think they've had this one circled. I think the revenge tour continues. If you remember correctly, there were a lot of cats that weren't on this team last year when they went to play Oklahoma State, and Oklahoma State came to Austin, and Texas really had them dead to rights. Let's call it what it was. They were up on them and couldn't finish the deal. I think the killer instinct is there from Texas this year, and I think we see a big game from Bijan Robinson. He's the catalyst for that RPO offense. He's been a bell cow for them all season long. You saw 224 yards from TCU last week. I think Bijan has at least 100 on the ground this week, and I think Texas makes a statement in Stillwater that it's a new leaf. It is a new leaf being turned over in year 2 under Steve Sarkisian. So we have Texas winning this game 34-27 on the road in a statement game for the Longhorns. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.